Ladies and gentlemen, I am Israel, the game is World of Warships, and this is a first look at Kaga. No, not that one. That's the new one, and Lord only knows what tier she would be if she was ever in game. The focus for today is this one, the Imperial Japanese Navy carrier Kaga, shortly to be arriving at Tier VII in World of Warships. This is a preview video, so the usual disclaimer applies. Everything about this ship and her air group is currently subject to change. My absolute first impression of Kaga, she is huge. Seriously, she is absolutely colossal. This is Hiryu, the Japanese Tier VII tech tree carrier. Note the relative positions of the cranes behind her. Their control cabs are just about level with the flight deck. And this is Kaga. Her flight deck is higher than the top of Hiryu's conning tower. And yes, her stealth absolutely sucks. With camouflage, her surface detection is 12.2 kilometers, her air detection is even worse. It comes in at 13.6. I didn't think I'd ever suggest concealment expert on a carrier, but it might be an idea here. Her turning performance is bad by most standards, although she's actually pretty agile for a heavy carrier. Turn radius is 1,080 meters, rudder shift 14.4 seconds. Kaga is also just the slowest of the Tier VII carriers at 28 knots. Hiryu at 34 knots can run from most battleships and cruisers. Kaga can't, basically. The main advantage of her size is that she loads 85 planes into her hangars. That amounts to just under 2 complete reloads of her air wing, and gives you a bit of a buffer for casualties. Speaking as someone whose very limited carrier experience has been with the light and escort carriers at tiers 4 through 6, it's a welcome change to actually have some spare aircraft. The catch, however, is that you're probably going to need them, because Kaga's air group is built from tier 6 planes. I should note here that Kaga gets the standard Tier VII carrier matchmaking. She will always be opposed by another Tier VII carrier, and there might be one other carrier on each side, either Tier 6 or Tier 7. She will never, however, see a Tier 8 carrier, so at least Wargaming didn't put her with the kids in Carrier Division 5. You get a choice of 2 loadouts. You can have either an attack load consisting of 1 fighter squadron, 1 torpedo bomber squadron, and 3 dive bomber squadrons, or you can go for a more traditional load, 2 fighters, 2 torp bombers, 1 dive bomber. The 113 load is more unusual. Dive bombers are usually an American thing, and it's also highly ironic, because the usual attack sequence with this load is to send the torpedo bombers in first to draw out air defense, hopefully cause flooding and thus draw out the target's damage control, and then use the dive bombers a few seconds later to set multiple fires and leave the target to burn to the waterline. If this torps then bombs sequence sounds familiar, yeah, that's because it's the attack sequence that killed Kaga at the Battle of Midway. However, if you're going to use this loadout, I would suggest divisioning up with a good flagship, ideally an Atlanta or a Flint with their unlimited defensive fire cooldowns, because that lone fighter wing is going to be of more use for scouting and escort than air defense. Your bombers will need a reliable flak trap, and your allies will need somebody to keep enemy bombers off them. The fighters are exactly the same as the ones you get on the upgraded Ryujo and the stock Hiryu. You get 4 A6M20s per wing, that goes up to 5 with air supremacy. That was decent at tier 6, but at tier 7, they're up against the Hiryu's A6M5Cs, Ranger is fielding 6 or 7 ship wings of F6F5s, and of course Saipan is fielding 3 or 4 tier 9 F4U4s per squadron. The other guy's fighters will significantly outgun you, and Dogfighting Expert will only cushion that a little. They'll probably have more health, the Americans are slightly faster, and there's a good chance that there will be more of them in the air. Basically, Kaga really doesn't do air superiority, even in the 221 loadout. If you want that, go for Saipan, Hiryu's 312 load, or Ranger's 202. If the fighters are subpar, the dive bombers are interesting, to say the least. Firstly, they come in wings of 6, 7 with air supremacy, rather than the usual 4 or 5 on Japanese carriers. Secondly, they have the weakest bombs in the game. The N6 Mod 1 that Kaga uses does 2,600 damage. That compares to the 4,600 damage of the standard Japanese N25 and the 7,500 of the American 500-pound A&M 64. We won't talk about the 1,000-pounder. Kaga should never see a plane that's equipped with it. If the bombs are dubious, however, the pilots are hot stuff. The dispersion on a manual dive bombing drop is ludicrously tight. If you aim it right, the pilots can easily put every single bomb onto the deck of a battleship, or even a heavy cruiser. Standard auto-drop dispersion is a bit more at the mercy of RNGesus, but it is considerably tighter than the other Tier VII bombers. Kaga's torpedo bombers are also a bit different. Firstly, they have the fastest airdrop torpedoes in the game. They do 48 knots out of the box, 53 knots with torpedo acceleration. So no, the Russians won't be outrunning these. And they do seem to be a bit harder for people to evade. The drop pattern is also slightly odd. The core of it is the standard 4 abreast that the Japanese use, but the extra 2 planes tuck in behind and drop their torpedoes about 100 metres behind the first 4, putting a second wave down, and therefore getting 6 torpedoes into a frontage that would normally only be good for 4. So, after a few days with Kaga, what are my thoughts? Well, it's been a wildly inconsistent few days, that much is beyond doubt. I've had 100k plus damage curb stomps, I've had clutch games, I've had 20k disasters, and then there was the game where I ran into Papi de Pupi, and you can guess how that one went. As she stands, I would say Kaga is a very precise ship, and she requires a very accurate player as a result. Her bombers run much tighter attacks, packing 6 torpedoes into a frontage that normally only contains 4, and the dive bombers, especially on manual aim, can put the bombers within a few metres of their target point. If your aim is on the mark, then random number generation can only mess you up on fires and flooding, and even that's limited when you've stuffed a dozen bombs or torpedoes into a target. That same precision, however, demands accurate aim from the player. Sure, RNG can't mess up a well-aimed bomb drop, but neither can it give the bombs a friendly nudge if the target is a few metres off from where you thought it would be when the circle went yellow. Similarly, the torpedo bomber's narrower attack means more fish on the target, but only if you aimed it right. Kaga's main weak spot is her fighters. Even with a 2-2-1 loadout, they can't really compete with anything else at Tier 7 in a straight dogfight if the enemy fighters are being even vaguely competently handled. They're not even that great as sacrificial units to lock enemy fighters down while you get the bombers through, because enemy fighters in 6.4 can simply strafe out of the dogfight. So you've got to make good use of strafing tactics to even begin to contest air superiority. That's another manual attack requirement, and I'll happily admit it's something I haven't quite got the hang of yet. My overall impression of Kaga? She is very much an expert's ship. She's got a very high skill floor with her reliance on manual attacks, even more so than the usual carrier demands of micromanagement and map awareness, but she's also got a very high skill ceiling. If the enemy aren't paying attention to their air defences, a competent player will find that her precision turns her into a veritable murder machine. Newbies, however, are going to lose planes left, right and centre and accomplish very little, because that same precision makes her completely unforgiving if you can't anticipate a target and aim accordingly. The principal counter to Kaga is that she can't really fight a Saipan or an air superiority carrier. The only options I can see there are either an early game snipe, good luck, or else repeatedly rope-a-doping the enemy fighters into friendly flak to whittle them down before unleashing the bombers in the mid to late game, and I've had some luck with that tactic. If anyone has other suggestions, I'm open to them, because I really need to up my carrier game. But that's a problem for another day. I have been Yusril, that has been a preview of Kaga, and until next time, farewell.